Welcome to ISE's FX Options Weekly Outlook, a weekly outlook on the US dollar versus the major currencies, hosted by Jason Ayres, a top industry instructor and founder of OptionSource.net. Learn to trade your views on the strength or weakness of the US dollar.
Hi there and welcome to the ISE FX Options Weekly Outlook. I'm your host, Jason Ayres, founder and president of OptionSource.net. As always, we're going to start with a weekly look at our U.S. dollar index. This is a fantastic way to gain a little bit of perspective as to how the U.S. dollar has been trading against a basket of currencies. Last week, we identified the U.S. dollar index trading into a significant resistance level, which represented a 50% retracement on the bigger picture price action. We suggested that a rejection off of that would likely play down into the 77 to 78 focal zone, which is indeed what happened. We were cautious, however, of the FOMC meeting that was taking place on Tuesday. They decided not to do anything with the interest rates, and so subsequently we did see a little bit of a move to the downside, or as expected, a rejection off of that 50% retracement zone. So right now we have to be cautious of the possibility of a consolidation at this level, as we are at a very significant support. That being said, a consolidation and a break back up would likely meet with resistance in at that 80 to 82 level again, which is an area that we've been focusing on over the last couple of weeks. Now, should we see a breakdown in the U.S. dollar index, that break through that 77 to 78 focal zone would likely see prices start trading down towards that 74 to 75 area where they broke out of not so many weeks ago. Moving down into our MACD, we can see that we're starting to roll over a little bit. However, we do still see a continuation of the trend to the upside, so we have to be cautious with any sort of long-term move to, or expecting any long-term move to the downside. Although we are seeing a little bit of weakening here, this could be just a natural retracement into some key focal areas before a continuation. That being said, the momentum has also tapered off to the upside, which is only to be expected after such a significant run. So we have to keep this into take this into consideration with respect to any decisions we make as we trade our FX options. That being said, let's take a look at our first FX option pair value, the CDD, the U.S. versus the Canadian dollar. We continue to reference this significant resistance level here at the 107 to 108 focal area. Now, we did identify at the 106 a significant pivot point and suggested that a breakthrough of that would likely see us play down into the 104.5 to 105 level, which represented that next area support. That is indeed what has taken place. That being said, again, much like that the index, any sort of consolidation here in an attempt to push above leaves a window open for a retest of that 107 to 108 focal zone. Right now it appears as if we're starting to enter into a little bit of a channeling pattern with respect to the Canadian and the U.S. dollar. That's something that we did see take place as we made attempts to break above that 103 focal zone several weeks ago. If we look at our MACD, we can see that we've actually turned down, suggesting that we are in a, at least for the short term here, a downtrend, and our momentum has definitely tapered off. Momentum to the upside has definitely tapered off, suggesting that we should be open to the possibility of a continuation down into these lower lows. That being said, as mentioned, a break below this significant support area here at the 104 to 105 focal zone leaves a window open for a test down into that 102 to the 103 area. Okay, let's take a look at the YUK, the U.S. versus the Japanese yen. Last week we suggested a break below that 105.5 to 106 focal zone would likely meet with some support down in at the 103.5 to the 104. We saw prices actually consolidate between this price range and finally break back up into it. At this point, we see ourselves playing in and around the 107 area. The next logical target to the upside would be the 108 to the 108.5. That represents a significant area of resistance over the bigger picture. That being said, if we have a look down at our MACD here, we can see that we're starting to cross up, suggesting that that preceding downtrend is now starting to lose some momentum, suggesting maybe we're starting to build some strength to the upside. Our RSI is also moving from an oversold area, heading towards that crossover of the 50%, where we can be a little more confident with respect to any sort of a continuation to the upside. Now, if prices should happen to break above the 108 to the 108.5 focal zone, we would still be targeting that 110 to 110.5 over the shorter time frame as being that next logical area of resistance to the upside. Well, it looks like we're finally seeing a little bit of backfilling on the EUI, the US versus the Euro, after a very significant move to the upside. You can see here that prices have finally rejected off of that 70 focal area that we had identified, and it's actually playing down into that 68 to 69 focal zone, which we had suggested as being that next logical target to the downside. Now, that being said, we have to be cautious about any sort of a consolidation here as prices play along this 68 to 69 focal zone. The possibility for a retest of that 70 is something that we have to consider. That being said, if we look down at our MACD, we can see here that we've had a significant crossover, suggesting that we may now be starting a little further retracement to the downside, or momentum seems to be building in that downside trend as well. So if the 68 to 69 focal area doesn't hold, realistically we have to consider the possibility that we may just move down into that 67 to 67.5 zone there. So not a real significant move to contemplate here, but based on the fact that we've had a significant consolidation in the past year, we can't rule out that possibility. And in similar fashion, the BPX, the US versus the British pound, has also done a little bit of backfilling over the last week. We did identify that 56 to 57 focal zone as being a very significant area of resistance, and suggested that the possibility of a retracement is something we needed to consider. We did say that a 38% retracement would likely see us play down into that 54 area there, which is exactly what happened. That zone now becomes a very significant area that we need to consider as a possibility of this particular pair value finding some support, or at least doing some consolidation before making any further move. Now, any sort of consolidation there is likely to meet with some resistance back into that 56 to 57 focal zone, with the possibility of a rejection. If we move down to our MACD, we can see that much like the EUI, we have had a MACD crossover, suggesting that for at least a shorter time frame here, we are in a bit of a downtrend. Our RSI is also supporting that with respect to a buildup of momentum towards the downside as well. That being considered, if the 54 to 54.5 focal zone does not hold, again, in the spirit of the EUI, we don't really have a large move expected to the downside here before meeting with some consolidation, as we look at the 53 to 53.5 as being the next sort of area where we would likely meet with some consolidation. All right, let's have a look at the AUX, the US versus the Australian dollar. Well, we have seen a very significant run or build up in strength of the US dollar against the Australian dollar. We were looking at that 124 focal zone as being an area of significant resistance, and suggested that a break above that would likely play into the 127. We did see it break below 124, but then over the last week play back into that 124 to 127 zone. We saw a rejection off of that, again a break back below. Now we find ourselves actually breaking below a significant pivot which was established last week. That being said, the next logical area of support would be to target our price range down in at the 116 focal zone, which is also being supported by that crossover of our MACD and that momentum that seems to be building towards the downside. What's interesting as well is that 116 15 focal zone also represents a 38% retracement when compared with that bigger picture move to the upside. So certainly something to consider with respect to that being the next logical area of support and a significant target to the downside. Folks, that being said, that has been your FX Options Weekly Outlook for the 22nd to the 28th. As I mentioned, my name is Jason Ayres. I'm the founder and president of OptionsSource.net. Thanks for joining me this week. We'll see you here next week.
Thank you for participating in this week's session. Please join us again next week. For more information about Jason Ayres and to sign up for free FX Options trade alerts, just visit www.optionsource.net. To learn more about ISE FX Options, including our weekly webinar series, visit us at www.ise.com/fx. ISE FX Options can easily be traded through all options-enabled brokerage accounts. These exchange-listed securities are cash-settled in U.S. dollars and have a European-style exercise.